welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, where we talk about how writing works, how writers work, and why the best writers risk being strange. And one of the things that I have a hard time talking about with writing is style. And so I thought, rather than talk about it directly, I would like to kind of metaphorically and elliptically discuss writing style by actually talking about style in a broader, more abstract sense. And so I have with me Tara Cole-McCaffrey, who has graciously agreed to be my guest to discuss style, fashion, and so forth. And Tara is also known as Patron of Dreams, and you can find out more about what she does at patronofdreams.com. But can you, Tara, talk a little bit about sort of what you do and kind of your core, how you got into it?
How I got into it. Oh, wow. Okay. What I do is I own a vintage shop that's predominantly online, and I do some pop-ups here and there. I sell vintage clothing from the 1890s to the 1990s, so quite a range of eras. And I also do some styling on the side for bands, promotional photos, film. I sell a fair amount of my vintage clothing to the film industry. So if they're looking for a specific era, they'll say, we're looking for this date to this date, send me a message, and then I'll pick and curate a little collection for them to go through, and they'll buy it from me. So that's something I do too on the side. So how I got into it was a very natural, organic kind of a process that just unfolded, that it wasn't something I chased or pursued. Style has been something that has just interested me, come naturally to me, has been my choice of creative expression since I was a little kid. And then I got into dance and theater and started doing musicals in high school, and anything that was costume related, I somehow dove into that and started doing that. And then as I got older, I started teaching dance classes, and we were getting involved in productions and doing sort of vaudeville theater things, and like kind of a mishmash of all different kinds of arts and creatives coming together, fire spinners and acrobatics, and they all wanted costuming and input into stage design and curation and all of that. And so I sort of got involved in doing that. And through that, I started meeting people in film. And also my husband, Gregory Kamichuk, who you know very well, was working on a film with a little production company. And they asked me to do some styling for a horror film they were working on, and they had just seen some of the work that I had been doing and said, clearly this is something that you do comes naturally. So it just kind of, I got plucked, and then I ended up being in the film. They wanted me to be in it. They wanted me to do a scene where I was dancing with a boa constrictor.
That was the snake.
That was the snake one. And they asked if I would do it. And I said, yeah, sure. And then they said, well, we have another actress that is coming in, and we want you to style her as well, similar to you, so that you look like you are performers on this stage for this particular event. And I said, okay, great. So I ended up styling her. And then the next thing I knew, it was a couple of years after that, I ended up having my first kid, and I had stopped working at my normal day job as an environmental scientist, and I took a break to be home with my kids. But then in the middle of that, I got a phone call from that director that was part of that production crew and said, hey, I'm shooting a music video. Can you come and style it? And we got into it, and I was like, I'm not a stylist. I'm not, he's like, yeah, you are. You've been doing this forever. You are, do it. And so I did, ended up doing it. And it was a group that was like 8 or 9 members. And then there was a DJ, and then suddenly this music video had all these extras. Suddenly I was working on this massive production and had to dress a huge number of people in a really short period of time. So it just kind of was a sink or swim scenario. And that just kind of started an entire ball rolling of like, I ended up doing more music videos after that, and then one of the director that I was working with on it also was a photographer on the side, and he had kind of gotten away from his photography and said he wanted to get back into it. And I said, well, I'd like to build a portfolio of some of this stuff that I'm doing and play around with it. Why don't we just start doing photo shoots together where I can play with styling and set design and all of that, and you can come and do photography. And he said, yeah, great. And I said, okay, well, I'll create a blog, and then I'll throw it on the blog so I have a place to just store it and keep it and throw some of my ideas, and then, you know, put some writing with it, and there you go. And so that started, you know, I think probably 10 years ago. And so that started, and then as that evolved, to continue doing the styling, like when you start doing that, for me, it was really important that I do only secondhand and vintage clothing, and try to keep it as sustainable and ethical and environmentally friendly as possible. So I started, you know, getting a collection of pieces and things that from all of these shoots and things that I was doing. And suddenly it was like, you know, to keep this going, to keep it sustaining itself, to open a vintage shop just became sort of the logical next step. So it was really a very organic process, you know, and I was friends with a lot of the vintage sellers in the city, people who had been doing this since like the 80s and 90s. Like I knew the originals, the OGs, right? And they were like, well, it took you long enough. Like it was funny to have them come back and say, well, yeah, you should have been doing this forever. And I was like, yeah, I guess so, you know. But so here we go. So I launched the shop at the very end of 2018. So I was really only in it for about a year, and then the pandemic hit. So it was a very not an easy place to start. It was a rocky road in the beginning, even though it was online, and there was definitely an increase in online shopping. I wasn't really known yet. So it was a difficult time to try to get the word out when you can't go and socialize. And yeah.
And I would think with clothes, online buying has a particular challenge because people want to try it on, you know, right? They want to see what they look like, you know. So.
Yeah, it's a niche thing. I try to tell people when people are like, it should be for everyone, and it's for everyone. I say, yeah, the thing is that clothing is for everybody, but vintage is a niche thing. Nobody needs vintage. They choose it because it's unique, it's interesting, it's got history, story. There's so much diversity, but you don't need it. So it's one of those things that, I don't know. I just think that you have this particular group of people that have been interested in it for a long time. I enjoy the fact that that's becoming more mainstream, that more people are getting interested in it. But the people who have been buying online and shopping for vintage have been doing that since the 90s. Sure. As soon as we had the internet, essentially, as soon as we had eBay and whatever, they've been doing that. So there's a learning curve for people who are new to it, that, you know, you have to learn how to measure yourself, and you have to learn about, you know, the reason we take our time to put those descriptions is because the people who are buying online, they don't feel the same sense of like, I must try it on and touch it. And, you know, you start to sort of learn the industry and know.
Sure, and then you get a better sense of what kind of thing you're after, because as you say, it's a more niche approach to your particular, like in your head, I would think the person buying a vintage outfit, like in their head they have, as you say, this idea of what is their style, what's their creative expression. They're looking for things that match that or that bring that out. Yeah. Rather than just they're trying different things on.
Right. And I would say that there's different groups of people. They're the ones that are like, I'm looking specifically for this, which was the person that I was. I'd be like, okay, I'm looking for like a 1940s semi-sheer, you know, sort of thing. And you go hunting for that. And we just live in this beautiful time right now where you literally can search that. And there's so many, like my particular shop is on an app called the Gem app, where it's worldwide. It's a collection of vintage and secondhand sellers that sell worldwide, and you can get the app and you actually search specifically what you're looking for, and everybody who's selling similar things pops up with the price, and you can decide, you know, and you can determine, okay, well, I only want to buy something from Canada if I'm in Canada, right? Or whatever, or you choose the cheapest price if that's your choice. But
sure,
it's just the easiest it's ever been to find, and there's also the different groups of, there's those who want to hunt, right? The people who are selling vintage are hunters. We're the people that will dig through, somebody's basement pile or attic trunks or dusty old ass corner to find what we want and dig it out, clean it, fix it, beautify it, and it's treasure. I will spend hours and hours in a thrift store searching every rack because people are like, how do you find these gems? I'm like, it's work. It takes time. You have to dig. You also have to know what it is that you're looking for, because people, I take for granted sometimes that people just have no clue what era a thing is from, unless it's, really obvious. Oh, these are bell bottoms. They're probably from the 1970s, that kind of thing. But they don't know. They don't know by the fabric. They don't know the stitching. They don't know labels. They don't know, and that's the skill of it. Then there's the other people who love it, but they don't want to take the time. They don't want, this is what vintage shops, they exist for those people. I've done the work for you. Now you just have to go there, and I've curated it all. Like I would have killed for this in the 90s, to be able to go online, to go into somebody's store online and be like, wow, every piece is a gem. Like everything, you've done the work to put it all there, and I just have to pick it and cross my fingers that it's my size, because that's the thing. You win, you lose. With vintage is one piece, one-offs, right?
Work. Do you have so when you talk about it like that, you talk about kind of your journey into opening a vintage store, you really are talking about it there in reference in a couple ways to particular art forms.
Mm-hmm.
In your particular example, you had this kind of overlap with film, and you have kind of part of your business kind of overlaps with film and costuming in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also this side of it of, just having, as you say, your own kind of sense of style, or, this idea of your own creative expression.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, style or fashion, whatever you want, is sort of, it's in that interesting realm where it sort of is its own art form on some level. Then it also kind of intersects with these other art forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to know, like, when you're approaching looking for something for yourself,
mm-hmm.
Rather than, to put into the store, like, how is that different? What are the sort of things that you have in your head as to sort of what my style is and what I'm looking for personally versus, what are the kind of things that are there? It's a good piece,
Mm-hmm.
Although it's maybe not for me, it would go in the store. Like, how do you make that? How do you kind of determine your own style versus what has a style, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. When I'm choosing for the store, I'm looking for age, quality, uniqueness, all of, but for myself, what you're talking about is personal style. Personal
Yes.
style is, I don't know. Personal style will save us all is sort of how I feel, because personal style requires you to abandon all of the ways that we've been programmed and indoctrinated into trends and quote unquote fashion. Yeah,
I think of fashion and style as being different things.
Absolutely. Fashion is what they're selling you. Fashion is of the moment. You go back to the
Right.
old advertisements and you say, what is the fashion? It's the latest fashion, right?
It's very
back
trend focused.
It's trends. It's very dictated by the marketing machine, and clothing used to be made by designers and individual small stores and shops, things like that they had the say and were driving what they were selling. And so they were concerned about the happiness of their clients and their patrons. Now the decisions are being made by corporations. It's corporate decision makers that have no idea about clothing. That's not who's deciding, which is why you get this sort of sanitization of fashion. Like, if you go back in time and if you look at clothing from, say, the turn of the century and back even further, like we could get really into it. Like you look at the colonization, you look at the way things have become sanitized. And if you go way back, you see clothing used to be art. There was real artistry from all over the world. You look at the colors and the fabrics and the so much time and emphasis on
even particular materials. I think it's called muslin. I can't remember exactly, but there's particular fabrics that they don't really continue the process of making it in the same way anymore. Because it was so labor intensive, it couldn't be corporatized.
Exactly. And so that's what I'm saying, that when people say, oh, minimalism is really trendy right now, it's interesting because it's like minimalism is trendy because corporations have tried to make it as easy to make money as they possibly can. So the less color, the less design, the less an individual's taste is in there. Like if we make it white or gray or beige, and we make it very square and very, that trend is a corporate decision because more people will buy that and then try to customize it in some way for themselves. They reach the most people. Whereas vintage, you get so much diversity in cuts and colors and styles and eras, and people are scared of it because they're like, oh, it's so specific. And they don't know if it works. So for me, personal style, when we're talking about it, you're really looking at, first of all, letting go of all the marketing, the ways that we've been shamed, the way we've been told last month that this is the cool thing, and then this month that's so last season, that's out, that's not cool anymore, you're not supposed to do that. The way that we're told you can only wear certain things for certain body shapes, and so, like, you should be trying to look taller, slimmer, more balanced between your hips. Like this is traditional styling that's very, very, it's very shame-based, and it's really trying to sort of, and
it's very trend-driven. So I always think about in my lifetime, and I'm like, what, 40? I can't remember my age. I'm 44.
Okay.
So I remember just within, take half of that time.
Yep.
In that period of time, like from like high school to now, or till, a number of years ago, even just quote unquote, classical, cultural ideas about like, feminine beauty have shifted radically. Like when I was in high school, it wasn't cool for women to have like large butts. And now like that's the big thing.
Yeah.
That's just, it's a weird example, but it is like within that small time frame, we've had almost a 180 movement.
Almost every decade you can look at and say, and this is important, like you're bringing up a really important point, because it's the same in housing, it's the same in cars, it's the same in like
comic
interior
books,
decoration, comic, anything.
Yeah,
you can look at whatever the trend, like the reason you can look at somebody's like time capsule kitchen and say, oh wow, that's so 1960s, is because that was the trend they were pushing in the 1960s. That was what you found in the department store, those things. And so if you buy only what is trending and what is popular in that time, you are going to quote unquote date yourself, because then you'll be able to look back and go, oh, that was so 2020. It's
very interesting. I remember seeing the Metallica documentary, and and there's an interesting moment in the Metallica documentary where they're arguing about this album they're trying to make, which ended up being one of their worst albums. But it's divisive. Some people love it, some play it. But anyways, at one point, Kirk Hammett, their guitarist, they had decided and made this kind of corporate decision as a group to not have solos on the record, which is, of course, something that they were known for. And Kirk Hammett was kind of like the soloist, is like pushing out against this. And he says at one point, they're like, well, we don't want to do be trendy. We don't want to be following trends. He said, but if we abandon a trend, like in our style, he goes, and we date it to a trend happening now.
Right.
And he says, like, what, I know you think like, oh, we're trying to get away from this trend. He goes, but we're just really just dating it to a current trend. He's like, and then, what happens, 10 years from now, it's going to seem like a dated album. And he was exactly right.
Yeah.
But it's that weirdness of, how do you follow, for lack of a better metaphor, how do you follow your heart and kind of figure out who you are on a certain level? I think what's interesting about style, and I think this is true for personal style and even for like a writer's style, is there's 100 little decisions that go into it. And you have to, as you say, really sort out what are the things that really matter to me versus what I've been told should matter to me.
Yes. And it's really hard to do because we are absolutely bombarded with advertising and everything we see outside. I would say pay attention when you go out and you look around and you start to see the trends, and you can see where everyone starts to look like everyone else. And it's interesting because there's this attitude of like, but I'm cool and this is cool. And it's funny because you're like, you all look exactly the same, especially when you see the group of friends walking together. And I mean, I really fully expect it in like junior high. Yeah, because you haven't figured out, but you haven't figured out who you are yet. So when you're doing that as a group, right. I think that's really natural. When you're in your 30s though, like at that point, I'm kind of like, all right.
I think it's more invisible though in your 30s, don't you think? Like it's more invisible because like I'm wearing jeans, right? Like I bought at Value Village or whatever, but there's nothing in these jeans that I would say really represent me. But they're just generic jeans, you know. And you know they're utilitarian, you know, for me. But there's nothing. Like they don't have anything in them, if that makes sense. Where and I'm not concerned about it at the moment. You know, I just wanted some jeans that fit temporarily, kind of thing.
Right.
But I think like people don't realize when they're doing that sometimes. You know, they don't.
Yeah, and that's what's funny. You know, when you go back and you look at photographs when you're younger, okay, or you look at like pictures of your parents and you think, oh my God, how did they think that looked? How did I think that was okay? Or you look at hair, or you look at whatever, and you think, what was I thinking? What's funny about that is that we don't realize at the time you think that it's great, and you think that it's cool, and how much of that is you being influenced by what you're being told. So when you talk about personal style and you talk about how do you like listen to your own heart, how do you do that? We know what we like. We've been taught not to trust ourselves. We've been taught that you have to have an expert. Like here I am, talking to you as a stylist, talking to you as somebody that, like bands will trust to do their music video or do whatever. And they really want to stand out and they really want to look. They'll trust me for that. But my expertise is not in, I will tell you what to wear to look like, yes, can I follow those quote unquote, rules of fashion and make you look great? Yes. But will you walk away from that and be like, this is excellent. I'm going to dress like this all the time. And I'm going to like, probably not, right? Because there's no way. So what I do is I ask people a series of questions to show them that you know what you like. You know what is attractive to your eye and what isn't. You know what colors you like. So yeah, I can get into color theory with you and I can tell you that, oh, this and this will look really nice together. But maybe you'll look at that color and you'll say, freaking hate that color because it reminds me of the car that my parents had when we took road trips and my sibling and I fought the entire time. So I have this negative association with that color. Like it's very personal. And so instead I ask questions like, if you had to choose a car to represent you, to best represent you, okay? No money, like just imagine we have as much money as we want and we can make these choices and it's not practical, okay? Get rid of the practicality. It's not like, oh, I have 2 kids and a dog, so I'm gonna, no. Just you. What would you choose? And pay attention to if you have a choice, like for myself, there's absolutely a part of me that would want like a 4x4 Jeep off-roading, There's also a part of me that would want like a 1960s convertible, Jaguar.
Right.
Totally different. But if you, for some reason, really love those two things, put them over here because there's something about that and that combination that is who you are. If you were a holiday destination, okay? If you had to be like, this represents me, and you had to pick a holiday destination, what era? Is there a particular era or two that you really gravitate? And I'm saying that it's okay to have two, like you don't have to narrow it down to one because sometimes those contrasts, like for me, the 1970s, absolutely. the music, the style, just the freedom of that time, but also Victorian. Those are so contrasting. It's uptight. It's very like, but those particular eras come out in my personal choices and style all the time. And a weird combination of the two, and that particular combination represents me. So like,
I like the idea of the contrast between two things in some way representing you, because it kind of gets you out of the mold of I'm this or I'm that.
Yes, yes. And you might find, there's two or three, and then you ask simple questions like, are you more into color or neutrals? Are you more into, patterns, or are you more into solids? Do you like, I'm trying to think of some examples. These kinds of things, when you start to add it up and you start to do you like minimalism? Do you like maximalism? Do you, and you actually write these answers down, you'll start to see a pattern that sort of emerges, and you can see like where you can add subtlety. So maybe you really like the 1960s and you would consider yourself minimalist and you prefer neutral colors. Suddenly, you've got kind of a Jackie O vibe going.
It's interesting because these are very much the kinds of exercises that a writer would use to develop a character.
Okay.
And like what kind of character are they, and what is their personality? And so often what you'll do is exactly that kind of exercise. Well, where would they go on vacation? What kind of car would they drive? Right? Would they do this but really want to do this?
Yeah.
And trying to find those contrasts, as you say, I think it's so interesting. Like I would even say, if I'm talking about my personal style as a writer, what I like is, you mentioned minimalism and maximalism. What I like is minimalism and maximalism at extremes and swinging between the two. And so I can see in my own tastes that I'm often kind of running in one of these extremist directions, away from some sort of mediocre or middle ground compromise. But I hadn't. But so often you're getting pressure from the culture to define yourself in one direction. Particularly for marketing reasons. Because it's easier to market yourself as a minimalist or as a maximalist.
Right.
But as a person who does two things, it becomes very hard. Even working in a genre, if you write horror and you write, comedy, it's easier to pick one and drive everything down that path.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And push it in that direction. I guess that's interesting to me, but and less representative of how I think of myself, say. But I recognize the marketability of it compared to what I do.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought too much about exactly why that is, but I think you're right that like the culture encourages the boxing of people putting yourself in a box on some level. Like there's just a way that it can be unbranded, for lack of a better way to put it.
That's what I mean. It becomes this like, it becomes about marketing and saleability, and it's the same for me with my shop. I prefer diversity in my curation of what it is that I bring in. I have a small store. I have to be picky and choosy about what I bring in, and so even within that, I try to have that diversity, because I'm trying to say, please don't narrow yourself down into this niche because it's more marketable. And like I also have gone from being I've always had artistic circles of friends and people around me, and have always sort of pursued the arts, and so there's been that wide variety of types of people and style around me. But I've also worked in an office. I've worked in a very conservative, male-dominated engineering firm, and an engineering company, or an energy company, and had to rein myself back in order to sort of fit in, be taken seriously, all these other things. And so I tried to find ways to still be free and not be like having to completely, but it also meant that I swang so far the other way in my personal life outside of the office. That's when I really got into doing sort of artsy things on the side and shows and productions, and got more wild with my fashion when I wasn't at work.
That corporate culture really encourages conformity, and I understand why. You want to be a team player, right? They need a team that works together, and so on and so forth. It's easy for what I think maybe starts as a good goal, that you're going to work together in collaborative spirit. It's easy for that to tip over into this, conformist space where people are being punished for, originality. And, it's hard, I think, for companies just because of how they operate legally to get out of that mold. Although I'm sure some do. But what I find curious about it is I'll notice writers who supposedly have freed themselves from that existence. A writer who will move out of the corporate world, they'll quit their job, they'll start working for themselves, and then they'll start re-engineering that exact space. They'll start they'll come up with all these rules, and they'll start to talk to one another on the internet about all the rules about how you have to do this, you have to do that. This is the professional way to do things. You got to market yourself in this way. You got to start doing this.
Yep.
You got to have book covers that look like this. It gets you get very quickly into a space where everybody is the same.
Yeah.
And they're writing the same, and their books look the same, and they have the same marketing language, and it becomes very bizarre to me, how. That's why I call this podcast Writing the Wrong Way. And I'm always kind of trying to push in a particular direction, because to me it's all about, well, don't you want to do something different? Isn't the whole point to stand out from those other people? And I think ultimately that's where you can have a career, is either, settling into a niche in a useful and interesting way, or in kind of refusing niches on a certain level. Right. And being a sort of sui generis. Yeah. But I
think it's really important that when I say to move away from trend or move away of what the fashion of the moment is, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be, don't make it a rule, don't make it another rule to get rid of the rules. So if you like something and it happens to be trendy at the moment, that's not a reason to not do it. Don't be like, oh, I can't do that because
now is your moment.
Now is your moment. And in fact, it's great because sometimes it's like, oh, this is available now. Like there was a time, for example, if I go back to, the 90s, I would do this thing where I would, I was a student, I was working part-time, I was on a very tight budget and living in my own apartment, doing my own thing. And I would be going out somewhere and I would actually buy vintage clothes and alter them in some way to wear them out. And things that I was doing, so, this was like late 90s, I'd go and I'd find a pair of 70s, what they used to call elephant pants, right? So they were like the very wide leg pants. But they had a really high waist, and I'd go in and I'd cut them off at the top. I know this is blasphemy. A lot of the vintage people will be like, "Oh, I have what?"
Cut the band
I'd
off?
I'd cut the top part of the pants off, and I would move the belt loops down to make them like low, like Charlie's Angels style, low hip huggers.
Oh,
this was before it was a thing.
Yeah.
And then the early 2000s hit, and guess what came back? So I was wearing those, and I had like really wide 70s leather belt that I would wear and sort of wear that Charlie's Angel style. And then it came back, and it was everywhere. And I could have been mad about it, saying, oh, this was my thing. But then I was like, oh, look at that. I could actually go to the store and maybe buy something instead of having to like alter or do whatever for a brief time. And then it went out again, and then it became, whatever, onto the next trend.
Or it'll get watered down. Like one of the things I think is interesting about, I think it's most easy to see in fashion, which is what I think is, but you see it in other places. But I think what's most easy to see in fashion is when you have a thing happen and then it waters itself down. So like I always think when I was in high school, Kurt Cobain, when the whole grunge thing happening, and everyone was wearing the ripped jeans, and they were ripped to shreds. They were barely jeans. Yeah. And then it starts to water down, and now you can go in the store, and it's very common to have a pre-ripped jean, but they're not ripped like they used to be. Right. Right. They're just a little rip, a little rip here, a little rip there. Right. Yeah. Like compared to your whole knee would be out of the thing. And it's interesting to me, like, I feel like that kind of thing happens a lot in the kind of, when the corporatization of it starts to occur. You see it in other things as well. You saw it in music with, for example, Nirvana, and then the way that you had like bands after that, like Cage the Elephant or something come out, and they're doing the same sort of thing, but they're watering it down a bit. And, it could still be good maybe, but it is like, it starts to get down, down.
Yep.
And then you have other things. You see it in every art form. It's not even necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's easy to forget how shocking some of that stuff was initially, and how you do start to get into the problem of, well, is this a thing that I've decided myself?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Because it's insidious, the marketing and how it's everywhere. And like I said, it's not just the clothing you wear. It's interior decoration. It's cars. It's the way a restaurant is decorated. It's like it becomes this blanket over everything where you're like, we will be able to look back in 10 years or 20 years and say, oh, that was very 2020s.
Right.
That was the look of the moment. Everything was white or everything was beige. We just bought a house and we went, and it's this beautiful old character home. And we went in and, there's actually the term for it. They call it millennial gray. And every single wall was painted this quote unquote millennial gray. And I was like, well, that is there to make it so that the average person can walk in and visualize themselves there, because it has no personality.
Right.
It's got nothing. It's just absolutely the bare minimum so that you can imagine. And I thought, what has happened to our creativity and our sense of imagination?
I think the irony of that is, it's millennial gray, let's say, because you, as you say, you want to walk in and imagine this place has no style, so that I can imagine, my style occupying it.
Yes.
But the weird thing you get into is people don't bring a style into the space.
Well, this is what's happening, is that I'm like, that it's like that was decided for them.
Grayness.
Exactly. They see it and they say, oh, well, this is the style because some interior decorator decided that is what it is. So what I guess my advice to anybody is to say, stop taking the word of these professionals and these experts about what is in and what is how you should be dressing, how you should be decorating your home, how you should be doing, and understand that it's all bullshit. It's all a marketing tool. It's not about, like, how can they determine, well, how can you allow someone else to determine for you what is cool or what is right for you when you know damn well that another 2 or 3 months when the season shifts, they're going to be telling you the opposite. Now it's this new thing. Now it's this new color. Now it's this new whatever. And it's because they're trying to sell you as much stuff as possible. So they need to convince you. They gotta give you the problem, and then they have to give you the solution.
So
right.
If I can try to wind a couple things together, let me see. Am I characterizing this right? Do you think? It seems to me that part of, or maybe all of, just developing your own, style on a certain level, or figuring out what is your style or what best represents you. So that's actually the alarm for when we were supposed to start this.
Oh.
But I
guess we're on time.
It seems like the thing that a person needs to really do on a certain level is, two things. One is just expose yourself to a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. Go whatever it is, if it's clothing or writing or whatever it is that you're trying to like develop a style related to, expose yourself to a diversity of it. Go look at every go to a Value Village or a vintage store or something and look at everything and just sort of, and then secondarily pay attention to your responses. So rather than sort of receiving, here's what the response you should have to this thing that I'm also going to show you.
Yeah.
It's more about like going out and finding a bunch of different things, and then just judging your own responses. Because I find that so much of the problem I feel when you're starting out trying to develop who you are or what your style is, or just how you want to operate as an artist even. I feel like a lot of the problems that people run into are a function of them not knowing what the options are. Like they're doing something and they don't really like what they're doing, but they don't realize there's this other thing they could be doing because they just haven't been exposed to it.
Right.
And I feel like there's sort of the two solutions to it, which to me is like you go and just check out a bunch of things, like go read in a different genre, go to a different type of store, go to a different area of town, just go get some newness in your life, and then sort of, judge your response to it, pay attention to your instinct or your response to that thing. Because maybe you won't like it, maybe you will, but, that's sort of a process of figuring out through exposure rather than I'm going to pre-decide that I'm this kind of person,
Yeah.
Who likes this kind of thing.
Yeah. If your default is just to be influenced, which I would say is happening with most people, you see what's around you and you mimic.
Which is natural.
And it's also, I mean, the psychology of it is human beings want to belong and we want to feel seen and validated. And fashion is scary for a lot of people, or style is scary for a lot of people because there are so many rules out there telling you what you shouldn't do. And there's so much, I mean, you look at the magazines and it's like, who wore it best? And they pit two people against one another and you're supposed to be judging them and you're supposed to be saying, and there's just dumb, we're talking to writers here. So I just want to these people that are making up these rules are making it up. It's a story. It's a completely fabricated story. There's no actual truth to it. It's just a way to keep you in line so they can sell you the thing. So if you can accept that, fully really accept that, then you can say, okay, so the fact that I like to wear dresses over pants is actually allowed. And there is going to be jerks out there who are like, oh my God, can you believe she wear a dress over pants? And they're going to say that. And you're going to have that moment where you're like, the people that say that are the people that have been programmed into that set of completely make-believe rules. And that's not who you should be listening to. Like, don't follow the people with absolutely no imagination or magic that are completely programmed by somebody else's idea of what is good or not good. You have to listen to yourself and to trust yourself. Like, we know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out and exposing yourself to a ton of different things. I think sure. we already know, unless you're just 12 or 13, you might be sheltered. Sure. But if there's movies or characters that you love from like a favorite movie or a favorite music artist, or there's evidence everywhere, but people are looking out there instead of inside themselves to say, like I said, with that series of questions, what kind of car you like.
Sure.
Know what kind of vacation best represents who you are. Whether or not you like that maximalist look or more minimalist or somewhere in between. If you really don't like bright colors. These things. You don't need somebody out there to tell you. You already know. You have to trust yourself. You have to say that if you see this pattern against this pattern, you either like it or you don't. It doesn't matter what stylist says, well, those go together. So I don't care if you hate it. You're going to wear it. Like, of course not. You're going to look at that and say, no, if you absolutely love a flowery shirt, or if that is like not a chance in hell you're going to wear that, right? So we don't trust ourselves. We trust what other people are telling us because we're desperate to fit in. And I think that what's happening is that people have to understand the difference between, I think it was Brene Brown that did that research, and she couldn't believe that the opposite of belonging is not being rejected or being ostracized. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. That when you fit in, you cast away your own opinions, your own ideas. You can look at a group of people and you can say, okay, I see what they're wearing. I see what music they're listening to. I see the kinds of places they like to hang out, and I'm going to mimic that. That's fitting in. That's not belonging. So
Right.
I think we can find a way to, that's not going to last in the long run. You're not going to.
No, it's natural to do it.
Yes.
Like it's how you, when you're a kid, you mimic what your parents do, and that's
Yes.
how you kind of figure out, how to walk or, talk
Absolutely.
and all
Yeah.
sorts of, but there's a certain point where you start to having to individuate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, unfortunately, I think a lot of people, when they think they're individuating themselves, they actually are just accepting cultural programming.
Yeah.
And it's not, again, it's hard, it's natural to do that on a certain level, but you start to get into you can end up in this weird space, and I think it happens to writers as well. They want to become professional published writers, and they start to try to write more like the professional published writers.
Right. Mimicking what they're doing. And
and it's fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't go far enough, because you'll end up in this space where you are writing things you don't even like.
Yeah.
And you're doing, and it's not getting you where you want to go either, because it is like everyone else. And so you can't break out on a certain level. Like you start to hit this weird wall. What I always advise in writing is, again, I say try to write it the wrong way, and that's like my little joke way to phrase it. But what I really mean by that is, probably when you started out, you were doing something quote unquote wrong.
Right.
But that was like the thing that you thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you learned to get away from it because you were producing bad work, and you realized it was bad, and you learned to get away from it and start producing better work. And now what you need to do is go back to that thing you were doing wrong and find a way to make it work.
Right.
Because that's really the thing that you've abandoned, but is your style.
Mm-hmm.
The things you're consistently doing wrong, but in a way where you can kind of compensate for them with other things or whatever. Like there's something unique in your mistakes that you were making, which were your own, that if you can just rehabilitate those mistakes or even commit to them rather than trying to wash them out, like they can kind of become this hallmark of who you are as a writer or an artist or whatever, And similarly, if there's something that other people are saying, you got to stop dressing like this, it's just you're not fitting in. It's like, well, maybe there's a level of truth to it in the sense that it is off trend, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the bad decision. It could just be that you need to figure out a way to kind of hold to the decision,
right?
Or maybe you need to really develop a confidence.
Yes, it is absolutely developing a confidence. It is letting go of what I think probably one of the hardest things is that when you're doing something that's different than the trend has dictated, there are so many people deeply programmed into the trend that you get negative pushback.
Yeah, it's almost threatening them.
That's scary to people and to have. But I'm in my 40s now. I've been doing alternative kind of dressing for as long as I can remember. As soon as I started dressing myself, essentially, and I can say unequivocally now that the only people who have ever given me the stink eye for something I was wearing or have had negative input towards what I was doing that was different have been the most boring people that I can now put them in an entire category where I'm like, you are so, it's a projection of like, you are so concerned about fitting in yourself and you're projecting that onto me because my freedom is really challenging you. And it's 100% a projection. I've never had somebody with amazing style ever in my entire life look at what I was wearing and give me the stink eye. Never once. Never once has anybody who actually is interesting or doing something unique or trying something, has they ever been negative towards what I'm doing. I've only ever gotten the thumbs up or the nod or the compliment or just, walking past and saying nothing like a normal person, So we have to let go of that. Like, you will get that side eye. I once went to a festival with a friend of mine, and she commented, because I wasn't even wearing anything particularly wild that time because I was in a small town, like at a small town, like local festival. And it was kind of a little bit country style. And so we're walking along and she was walking beside me and we stopped eventually and we were going to watch some music, a band play. And she said, I don't know if I could do it. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, I watched every single person's reaction to you as we were walking. And she said, it's like so many she's like, there's surprise, there's like smiles ear to ear, there's this. She's like, but then there's the people that give you the dirtiest up and down look. And I laughed and I said, did you notice what they were wearing? And she's like, I did. And I said, do I need to explain it? She's like, yeah, it's like you just threaten them in some way, because they're like, how can you possibly be so free to do that, is really what's underneath it. But they want to try to knock you down. And so you get to a point, and it's taken me a long time to get here, where you're like, yeah, you know, you've revealed yourselves. And I know that what I'm doing is, you know, I'm not being asked to style bands because I have such weird style. Like, that's, you know what I mean? It's like, obviously it's working for me. And I own a vintage shop, so it makes sense. But yeah, no, people you have to get comfortable with pushing other people's boundaries a little bit, if you want to do something that's really different. But not everybody needs to do that. I'm not saying go out there and like put on a clown costume. Like, you can it doesn't need to be wild. Like, that just happens to be, I like contrasting things. Unless, and I like things. Pardon me?
Unless you're a juggalo.
Yes, exactly.
That's who you are.
Then go for it. Then wear the clown costume. But yeah, like, you know, and you choose your battles. You know, I don't go around wearing my top hat when I'm doing yard work, although I've thought about it, you know, just to let the neighbors know what's going on over here.
I like that idea. That would be great. Actually.
Yeah, you know, but I do sometimes, if I go to a festival or I go do something, you know, and it's going to get a reaction from people, and that's fine. It's like, you know, that's my self-expression. But I don't know. I see style as an art form. I think you're getting up in the morning and you're getting dressed anyway. So you either are going to default to what the social norm is projecting onto you and telling you should do, or you're going to be conscious about it personally. And I think the best way to really look at what it is that you like is to ask yourself some of those questions. It's like a bit of an internal, because you know. And I think that's the trusting really comes down to, you know what you like, you know what you don't like, and you can tell immediately when you put it on if you like it or not. This works or this doesn't work. And it's a little bit of taking some risks, you know? Like, it might at first make you feel a little uncomfortable because you're like, oh, I'm not really sure. But you can't let outside opinions be the thing that determines whether you do it or not. And I think if you're a writer, you're already brave. You're already putting your vulnerability is on display, because it's personal. You know, even if you're writing fiction or whatever you're writing, it's personal. You're putting your inner self out there for people to read and critique and have opinions about. And what the hell's the difference about your clothes and your outfit? It's exactly the same thing. If you're willing to do that, you're already brave. You already have the, you know, the capacity to use your imagination to put something there that is there may be negative opinions, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think just embracing the negativity, if it comes, as evidence that you're doing something right, you know, is often the way to go. I like to say that your goal as an artist should be to divide the audience.
Yeah.
You know, so many people want to please an audience, or and the way I like to frame it for writers is again, I just like to use the metaphor of a different art. So I like to say you can't be somebody's favorite band unless you're somebody else's least favorite band. You know, and
Absolutely.
like those are the bands that people really love or hate, right? Is, you know, the bands that are doing something unique, where you can, for that reason, become a real true fan of them, and you also just might despise them.
Right.
But anyone in that mediocre middle space, they can be in fashion, but they can't have a sustained career.
Right.
And, you know, but you can trick yourself into thinking that because they're in fashion right now. And so, you know, it becomes a difficult thing. And like, sometimes those bands, you know, just to kind of keep on the band metaphor, sometimes those bands will find their way. Like, they will kind of find a different thing that they can do.
Yeah.
And they can kind of develop a real career and a real following at that point. They'll immediately become less popular in terms of the mainstream, but they'll, you know, often move off to have a larger career outside of the mainstream.
Yeah.
You know, because the mainstream can't deal with it.
Right.
There's a level where, unless it's in fashion, the mainstream can't use you anymore.
Yeah.
Once you have your own style, again, unless that comes into fashion, then
Mm-hmm.
they can kind of play with you, and you get like weird historical moments where wild avant-garde things enter the mainstream. But for the most part, it can't live there because it can't be effectively corporatized consistently. And anyway, everything you're saying, I think, makes perfect sense. And the only thing I would kind of add on to that is, when you say that style is an art, is an art form, I would even, just kind of remind writers that I would say style, like your style is the art form itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're writing, your style is that writing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a level where if you are going to water the style down,
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of destroying the writing itself on a certain level.
Yeah.
And so you get into a real dangerous space anytime you're making a quote unquote marketing decision in that creative mode.
Mm-hmm.
It is dangerous. I see it all the time.
Yeah. And so my advice, if we're talking practicality, my practical advice is this: if you buy new, you're buying trends, because you're buying from corporate decisions made to sell the most of that thing as possible. It's mass produced, it's fast fashion, and unless it's a small, small designer that does small batch of sustainable, ethical clothing. In that case, not. But if it's, if you go into the mall or you're buying it from, some big box store or online or something of that nature, you are buying a trend. And your likelihood, I'm not saying don't do it if there's something that, if you're like, no, I absolutely want to have I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is that if you only do that, it'd be like walking into a department store or walking into a furniture place and buying the set in the furniture shop. I want that couch, that love seat, that table, the matching side tables, and the matching lamps. Okay, that's what people used to do. They would go in and they would buy that whole set, and that's the same when you buy off the mannequin. You go into the store and you see the display and you say, okay, I'm going to get this and this and this. So you will look like everyone else, and you will it's difficult. It's more difficult to create that individuality when you buy what is current, completely head to toe right now. You can go into that place and you can buy that couch, but then I would recommend go to a thrift store or go to an antique place and find some things that, are different, but you love, that might go with that, and buy it. And it's the same with clothing. So you might see something in a mall or something and absolutely love it. And you buy that one piece, and then you say, okay, now I'm going to go to the thrift store and I'm going to find some things that go with that. And I'm going to think about all of those kinds of questions. You're going to ask yourself those questions. You're going to find that pattern. You're going to say, what is it? There's an era I particularly like. There's a particular cut of things that I like. And when you find that, you recreate it. You don't have to do this elaborate, if you think of your body like an easel and you're painting and or not an easel, but what am I trying to say?
Canvas.
The canvas. And you're painting. And not every day you're painting your masterpiece. Some days you're just slapping some stuff together and playing around a little bit. And don't take it all so seriously. Not every time you get up you have to be putting together. So sometimes you can just, play around, investigate, be minimalist this day and be a little bit more maximalist that day. There is no rule. It's not really as serious as everyone wants to make it. It's the fear of people's response that makes everything so serious, and it's the marketing to make you unsure, afraid, and that's how they sell things to you. Because if you're always insecure, you're going to buy more, and they're going to keep trying to make you insecure about everything that you just bought to get you to buy next month's stuff. So you got to break free from that sort of paradigm. And if you go into secondhand and you go into vintage and you go into an antique shop and you trade clothes with a friend, or you go onto Facebook Marketplace and you find something that's just really friggin' cool that you're like, that jacket is unreal. And it's who knows what vintage. And maybe you'll be like, I really like the cut of this or the style of this. And then you read the label and then you figure out what year it's from. And you go, maybe this was like common in the 70s or common in the 80s or the 90s or whatever. And then you find more of that thing. And then you start to create, your own. Like, I'm not reinventing the wheel every time I get dressed. I have particular things that I go back to, and I re-wear things, and I recombine things in different ways. And that's the artistry of it, is how you take the things that you have and you combine them in different ways. And so you'll find something that works for you, and then maybe you'll buy that thing in 2 colors or 3 colors, if it happens to be like, or you'll find something that, mixes with that. So it's the practical thing is, don't buy everything from the floor of your favorite store in the mall. Don't go on Amazon and buy everything. Try to buy 1 or 2 items if you need to buy stuff fast fashion, but I will always recommend. The reason I say that is because if you're new to this, it can be overwhelming to go into a thrift store or go into a vintage store, because you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's scary. But the other thing is, almost everything that's being sold now in stores is a replica. It's a remake. It's a copy. It's mimicking something from a previous era. So guaranteed, it exists out there in vintage. You just have to look for it.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me about style. And I think, again, if you kind of are losing the thread of this, I think we brought back to writing quite a few times. But if you've lost the thread for some reason, just listen to it again and realize that all this kind of metaphorically operates in that same level. This is very much, whether you're dressing yourself or putting your story into words, it's about making these choices and exploring this process and seeing what you like. What do you like? Not, what do you think they'll like? Which I think is really the hardest thing for younger writers, especially, to figure out.
Yeah.
When am I doing it what I like versus what I think they're going to like. But thanks for talking to me, Tara. And,
thanks for having me.
Keep writing the wrong way.